you, Mary, and thank you so much to the League for inviting me. I really do appreciate any opportunities I have to speak to groups, just because it's such a complex area. And there are so many questions, even among immigration law practitioners. So, I thought I should tell you a little bit about my background, but most of this presentation will be about refugees and asylees. And my background goes way back to 1982, when I worked in a refugee camp in Thailand, housing refugees from the Vietnam War. So there were people there from Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos. So I was just a 20-something and a volunteer there. I ended up meeting my husband, who was my interpreter. So he's from Cambodia. He was a survivor of the Khmer Rouge genocide back, and then was kind of driven out, separated from his family in 1975. So he was my first immigration case. So he was not accepted as a refugee by the United States. At that time, our program was more accepting people that had military service, that had done military work with U.S. soldiers in those countries in Southeast Asia. So he was pretty much just a kid, really. So he was accepted by Canada, though, which was more looking to populate the plains there. So they were accepting refugees on the basis of people who were willing to study English and work, So he was accepted by Canada, and then later I sponsored him on a fiancé visa. So that was my first case. We went on to move from Chicago to Los Angeles. I went to UCLA Law School, studied more from a legal standpoint, the genocide again, of the Khmer Rouge and what had happened in Cambodia. And that kind of became really a lifelong interest to me. It's like kind of what happens in genocides and what causes people to do these atrocities to their fellow community members. So it's something actually I continued to work with for my whole life. So I went to law school, then later moved to Seattle and began working, clerked here, actually for Judge Trott. I don't know if any of you know him, and that's what brought me to Idaho, is Judge Stephen Trott was on the U.S. Court of Appeals, so down in Boise. And so I clerked for him for a year, went to Seattle, worked as an immigration lawyer, just kind of a regular immigration lawyer. I did business immigration, which would be like bringing over engineers. We did a lot of work with shipping companies up in Alaska and negotiating kind of with the Longshoremen's Union for fish processing staff from Japan. And then I did some family-based immigration, people sponsoring their spouses like I had done, and family members, people meeting people overseas in their overseas travels, and falling in love, wanting to get married. I also did I've always done kind of a lot of pro bono work, which is like volunteer for victims of violence, including quote the mail order bride type, so women who might get stranded over here, be subjected to violence. And then people fleeing persecution. In a case like a journalist from Colombia who was being targeted by government officials because he was like a whistleblower. So he was a target, so I applied for asylum for him. So anyway, and then after Seattle, so I went to Seattle 11 years, moved to Idaho in 2001. My practice changed more. I began doing a lot of work with agricultural workers from all of southern Boise. And it's been really rewarding and fun. It's been a fun population to work with. So, and that's been mostly family-based. I would say people sponsoring their spouses, spouses and children, sometimes parents. So working mostly from Mexico, but not all. And then in the last since about 2012, until present, I was working with a lot of refugees down in Boise. People from a lot from Africa, Congo, Burundi, Somalia. So, and then St. Alphonsus started a program for the survivors of torture. And so I was doing some legal work for them, and that involved working with people that had survived torture in Iraq, Afghanistan. Sometimes because of their connection, they might have been like interpreters for U.S. soldiers or something, and then were targeted for that reason. And then other people just coming from other countries where they experienced torture. So you can see so now I'm at the immigration law clinic here at the university. I'm just kind of filling in for 1 year while they do a national search, because I'm not really an academic. I like being kind of like close to academia, but not in it necessarily. So I'm not like a professor type. I'm kind of more of a in the trenches type, I would say. But I'm enjoying it immensely. I have 6 students working at the clinic, and I came in, and there's a caseload of about 28 cases, mostly asylum cases, and from all over, really, from the Middle East, primarily, I would say, and then, but also some from Central America. And we also have cases involving victims of violence. There's a particular type of visa for people who have been subject to violence, say domestic violence. They cooperate with the police, and then the police are able to sign off to enable them to apply for a certain kind of visa for like people that cooperate with law enforcement. So that's kind of what our caseload is. So sorry for this long introduction, but I just kind of wanted to show you the breadth of the field. You know, it's really quite a broad field. So I'll go on. But most of this presentation is about refugees and asylees. But I want to say one more thing. Also, since about 2013, immigration law has been my day job, but I've had another kind of passion, which is working with trauma survivors. And I got involved in that through a program in Rwanda that brings together perpetrators and victims or survivors of genocide there. And we do these 3-day, this is with the Quakers, Quaker developed program in East Africa. And they bring together perpetrators and survivors of the genocide for 3 days of kind of trauma education, icebreakers, sharing about loss and what they've experienced. So it's really an interesting kind of community-based mental health is how I see it, you know, for places that don't have mental health professionals. You know, it's really totally layperson oriented. So I've been getting very involved in that, and will expect to do more of that after I finish my year here with the clinic. So I've been working mostly in Eastern Congo, in South Kivu, but also Kenya. I've been to Tanzania and working with albinos there in Tanzania, and the program's also in Uganda. So kind of that whole region, Rwanda, Burundi. So it's kind of informed how I do my work. Actually, it's been very interesting. So that's where I'm kind of headed, I guess, if I were telling you where I expect to be. So this is the definition, kind of legalistic, of refugee and asylee. They're not willing to go back to their home country or take the protection of their home country because either they've been persecuted before in the past, or they're afraid they will be persecuted in the future if they return. And it has to be on account of one of these categories. So there's race, religion. So race might be like the albino people or albino in Tanzania, where they're targeted and actually kind of hunted, unfortunately. But so that might be a race issue. Color, really. Religion, plenty of examples there. Nationality would be maybe like a tribe. Like in Africa, there are many tribal clashes, tribal conflicts going on. So that would fall kind of under the nationality. Membership in a particular social group, that might be like my journalist, in Colombia who was targeted, municipal officials, police officers, LGBTQ people in some countries are targeted, HIV positive people are targeted. So there's like, this is like a heyday for lawyers, actually, that particular category, because everybody's saying that their person is in a particular group, you know. And then political opinion, which is kind of a traditional one, you know, like political enemies might be targeted. So refugees, so really the qualifications are pretty much the same. A lot of people don't realize this, but refugees would just be processed usually by the United Nations. Not always, but typical scenario is that there are these refugee camps throughout the world, and people would flee to those camps and be living in those camps, and would then apply for refugee status there through the United Nations. Asylees are people that would come into the United States. Like I mentioned, we have asylum cases at the clinic, and what have, in those cases, it might be someone who came in legally on a visitor's visa or a student visa, and then applied for asylum and said, I can't go back to Syria or to wherever. Sometimes it's changed conditions. You know, there might be things that happened in their country before, you know, for some reason. So those people, and the big group that's in the news right now, daily, is all these people at the southern border. So there are now tens of thousands of people applying for asylum at the border too, and I'll talk about them, I'll talk about that group in a little bit, but what they're doing, and some are coming illegally, you know, crossing the border, some are actually waiting in line to speak with an official there and present their case, you know, or a snapshot of their case, really, to say, I'm afraid to go back to El Salvador because of blah, blah, blah. So that's the group at the border. This is kind of worldwide. It's the biggest number, I guess, since they've been keeping track of numbers. So it's huge, it's huge. Right now, 70.8 million, and it keeps going up. So all of this refugee law really started pretty much after World War II, you know, with Holocaust survivors. You know, that's when kind of all the laws were put into place, and with the United Nations and everything, where they started setting up this kind of framework for processing refugees. So there's 25.9 that are under the UN mandate, which means that the UN is kind of protecting them, you know, has issued them documentation and so forth. So they're in camps.